CR 2225-2632. Like I said previously, this is the date and time for the preliminary hearing. Any preliminary motions or issues we need to address before we get started, Ms. Blake?
Your Honor, the state has let defense know we only intend to call 2 witnesses today. One of the witnesses is the case agent on this matter, and so I don't think he would be excluded. We would start with the other witness. So as far as any exclusions, I don't think it would be necessary unless defense has any witnesses they intend to call, and then the state would ask they be excluded for the state's testimony.
Mr. Malik, it sounds like there's going to be the lead agent that is going to be present. He or she will be testifying second. So I think the exclusionary issue from the defense perspective is probably moot. Any preliminary motions or issues that the defense needs to bring up?
Just exclusion of witnesses, Your Honor. And I may have a witness if I have just a moment.
Go ahead. The state has made the request to exclude witnesses. Beyond your client, do you plan on anybody else testifying that is still here, Mr. Malik?
I apologize. So repeat that question, Your Honor.
Beyond your client, is there anybody that you plan on calling to testify that is still here in the courtroom?
No, Your Honor.
We'll proceed then. Ms. Blake, any opening argument, or can we move right into testimony?
Your Honor, I think we can move right into testimony.
Who would the state like to call first?
And Your Honor, first actually the state would have an exhibit. It's been marked as State's Exhibit 1. For the record, the state would ask to admit this under Idaho Rule of Evidence 904. It is a public document that has been certified, a certified copy of a public record.
Mr. Malik, any objection to the admission of Exhibit 1 that's been handed to the court?
No objection.
Exhibit 1 will be admitted. Thank you. Ms. Blake, you can call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Benita Sutton.
Ms. Sutton, if you'll please come forward. And come to the feet over here on this side.
And Your Honor, correction on that, that's going to be Idaho Rule of Evidence 902.
902, you said?
Yes, Your Honor, I originally said 904.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton, if you'll please stand and face the clerk, raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this cause now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes.
Ms. Sutton, you can have a seat right here at the witness chair. And the microphone is on this side, but you don't need to speak into the microphone. You can face the 2 tables there. Please give me your full name, spell your last name for the record.
Bonita Brown Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N.
What is your current occupation?
I am the election clerk for Fremont County.
Thank you. Ms. Blake, you may inquire when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Sutton, were you employed with Fremont County in the years of 2022 and 2023?
Yes.
And as part of your job duties, do you review voter registrations?
Yes.
If a physical card is filled out, does Fremont County keep a copy of those?
We keep the actual card, yes.
And are you one of the custodians of those records? Is there another way in which someone can register to vote rather than filling out a physical card?
They can go online and register online.
And if they register online, are you provided a physical copy of what they put online?
No, just a summary.
And is that because as they fill it in, it's boxes that they add the information to?
Yes.
And when you're given a physical summary, are you able to create a printout of that?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask that the witness be shown State's Exhibit 1, and I have my copy as well as the court would like.
Exhibit 1 is right here. I'll have that given to the bailiff. Exhibit 1 will be handed to the witness. Go ahead, Ms. Blake.
And Ms. Sutton, do you recognize Exhibit 1? Have you seen that before?
Yes.
Is this in fact something that you printed out based on a voter registration?
Yes.
Of the online system? On that, we see a residence address and a mailing address. Are those generated by the system?
That, just because the voter inputs that information and then it's given there, yes.
And then that's the printout you get?
Yes.
So on there we see a residence address in Island Park. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then we see a mailing address in Idaho Falls.
Yes.
Also, when you look at this online system, does it tell you if someone has registered to vote in Fremont County previously?
In the past, like if they moved or come back, then it would show us that they had, yeah.
Would it show you if they registered in another county necessarily?
Not necessarily, but sometimes it does, but not necessarily.
And when someone inputs this information, is there anything that you're doing at the same time to check the information they're putting in?
No, the DMV checks like they put in their driver's license, and the DMV verifies that information on their driver's license.
And do you know, during the time before May 2023, could someone register with an out-of-state license?
Yes, before this election, the law was that they could have an out-of-state ID to verify their person, and then they would have to just show proof of residency.
And are there various documents that are accepted as proof of residency?
Yes, it could be a power bill, it could be insurance, it could be a variety of things.
And as part of your job duties, are you supposed to, or are you required to do anything to verify the information being provided by the potential voter?
No, if the DMV clears it, once they sign it, it's considered valid enough.
Do you keep copies of any documents provided as proof of residency?
No, we just check a box saying that we checked it.
And are you aware with the online system, is there also a notification that the voter is signing under the penalty of perjury?
They do have something, there's like a checkbox and they verify that they're not breaking the law.
And with the online system, does it also require a signature?
I think it's like an electronic signature where they like, this is as good as your signature, but I don't think it's like a physical signature.
And when you get the printout, your printout does not contain that signature, is that correct?
Correct.
But you can see a screen where a signature exists.
The signature that we see that exists if they vote in person, they sign the poll book, and that signature will be attached to their voter record.
So when they actually vote.
Yes.
And when we look at this form in front of you, the Exhibit 1, does that show that there was in fact a vote cast by Chad Vanderbeek in the May 16, 2023 election?
Yes, the vote was requested by absentee, and so I mailed a ballot to the mailing address.
And the mailing address would have been in Idaho Falls?
Yes.
The state does not have any additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. Cross-examination, Mr. Mallett.
Thank you. Ma'am, does this show any other votes by my client?
No.
Do you have any knowledge where my client voted anywhere else?
If he voted in any other Fremont County election, it would show up here, and it does not show up here.
What about in any other county?
I don't have that filter on, so no.
Do you have access to that information?
I can request access to it.
Have you requested that access?
I don't know.
Have you done any investigation on whether my client has voted anywhere else?
I've done a lot of searches on a lot of different people. I don't remember exactly who I have looked up for every scenario.
So is it possible that this is the only vote my client has cast in the state of Idaho?
Sure, yeah, that's possible.
Does anything about this paperwork or your knowledge of the case indicate that my client is not a resident of Island Park?
Looking at this, I would have no qualm saying that he was a resident of Island Park because I have limited information, and so that's what it is.
So it's very possible, according to your information, that he voted legally and is a resident of Island Park?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. I would move to strike. This calls for legal speculation and legal conclusion.
Sustained.
Do you have any information indicating my client is not a resident of Island Park?
No.
Do Do you have any information indicating my client does not continue to have a desire to continue to reside in Island Park?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
If the witness knows the answer to that, she can answer. Go ahead.
Could you repeat the question?
Do you have any indication or any information indicating that my client does not continue to intend to reside in Island Park?
I have no information.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect Ms. Blake.
No further questions, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. You can be excused if you'll hand that exhibit to the bailiff.
And Your Honor, just for purposes of clarity, is Ms. Sutton free to be excused and or can she remain in the courtroom if she chooses?
Mr. Malik, any objection to Ms. Sutton being excused or remaining in the courtroom?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Sutton, you can remain in the courtroom if you'd like to. You can also be excused if you want. Ms. Blake, your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Detective Hardy.
For the record,
John W. Harding, Harding.
what is your current occupation?
Detective with the Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
Ms. Blake, any prior remarks?
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Hardy, how long have you been employed with the Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
Since December of 2015,
And how long have you held the title or position of detective?
I believe since March of 2024.
As part of your job duties, were you assigned an investigation into some concerns regarding possible illegal voting?
Yes,
And did that deal with one specific election?
yes.
Do you recall which election that was?
The May 16th, 2023 election for the Idaho Park precinct.
And as part of your investigation, did you learn or was the name Chad Vanderbeek brought to your attention?
Yes,
And was he brought to your attention as a potential person that may not be a resident?
yes. We had the election clerk generate a list from January 1st, 2023 to May 16th, 2023, roughly those dates, individuals that registered to vote in the Idaho Park precinct.
And as part of your investigation, did you look into different mechanisms or factors to try to determine the residency of Mr. Vanderbeek?
Yes,
As part of your investigation, did you check into whether or not there was any homeowner's exemption claimed by him?
yes.
And did you discover if there in fact was one?
No, we could not find a homeowner's exemption.
Did you look into employment history to try to determine where he may be working?
I believe we did make an attempt, yes.
And were you ever able to determine anything definitively?
No,
As your investigation progressed, well, let me back up. Are you aware if Fremont County Sheriff's Office had contact with someone at the Vanderbeek residence in Idaho Park at some point?
yes.
Do you know who in particular that contact was made with?
I believe in our local files, there was a few incidents related to the defendant and his parents. Recently, a patrol deputy spoke to the defendant's father at that residence in Island Park.
And were you present for that conversation?
No,
Were you later advised of it or did you learn of it?
yes.
And was there anything about that contact that played into this investigation?
Yes,
Was there some information you learned that caused additional concern?
yes.
And what was that information?
Objection, hearsay.
Ms. Blake?
Your Honor, I would be introducing this as to why the detective did what he did next in his investigation, not for the truth of the matter.
So, in as much as there is some foundational questions here, the court will allow the questions, but ultimately any information the trier of fact, which is me, is going to use, it will not be used because of hearsay. So I'm sustaining the objection, but I'm allowing the questions in order to lay some foundation in the court. So go ahead, Ms.
I believe Deputy Thomas and Deputy Trujillo responded to the residence and spoke to the defendant's father. And in that conversation, we're told that the defendant and his father lived in Idaho Falls. And and I believe also was stated, I'd have to refer back to the report, but the Island Park home was a summer home.
And this information was learned as you were involved in your investigation, is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to renew the objection, Your Honor, and ask that testimony be struck. I don't see any foundational value. And follow-on question is not one about follow-up investigation.
That answer will be stricken from the record as much as it is being used for the truth of the matter asserted or basically as evidence in general. Ms. Blake, if you have follow-up questions, I'll already asked that.
Based on that information, did you take further steps in your investigation?
Yes, we requested and received approval for a search warrant for the defendant's Idaho state tax return.
And were you in fact able to obtain those?
No, the Idaho State Tax Commission, when we served the warrant for the defendant and his parents, for their tax returns indicated they had no record.
And after you learned that, at some point, did you in fact make contact with Chad Vanderbeek?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
If I recall correctly, it would have been on or about August 27th of this year.
And when you made contact with him, do you recall where that contact was made?
It was made at their Island Park cabin.
Was anyone else present at the cabin?
My partner, Detective Ferguson from the Madison County Sheriff's Office, was with me. The defendant's mother, Jody Vanderbeek, and father, I believe, Hans Vanderbeek.
And do you recall when you arrived who you spoke with first?
We spoke with Jody first. She was sitting on the porch.
And then did you ultimately speak with Hans?
Yes.
And when you spoke with Hans, was Chad present as well?
I believe we initially greeted Hans and then made contact with the defendant and then spoke with both of them in the kitchen.
And were they willing to speak with you at that time?
Yes.
When you spoke with Chad, did you talk to him about the issue of residency?
Yes.
And do you specifically recall talking about any specific years?
We had a conversation. I know the defendant asked what this was in relation to, and we explained the voting and the election. The defendant affirmed that he had voted. I asked the defendant where his primary residence was, and he stated Idaho Falls. Later in the conversation, I asked if the Island Park cabin was a summer home for 2022, 2023, and 2024. I believe the defendant's father made a statement about 2020.
Objection, here, sir.
Sustained.
During that conversation, the defendant stated 2022, and then there was a statement made about his parents being sick. And I asked if that's when Idaho Falls would have become the primary residence during that time, and the defendant stated to me, yes, sir.
And was your understanding that you were talking about the years of 2022, 2023, and 2024?
Yes, and I think with the conversation and the state, or the specifically 2022 mentioned, I took that to be an answer to that, yes.
At any point, was the election of 2023 discussed, that May 16th election?
Yes.
Do you recall if Mr. Vanderbeek made any statements in relation to that election?
We spoke about him voting in that election. I asked them why they voted in that election. I believe the defendant stated that he believed, and remembering from our report, I have to reference it for an exact quote, but essentially that somebody should be able to do what they want with their property, and I believe he made the example about renting it out.
And in relation to the Idaho Falls property, do you recall if Mr. Vanderbeek indicated anything as to why they had purchased that property or why he was residing there?
Yes, and speaking with the defendant about the address in Idaho Falls, he stated initially he bought that house for his parents, and then stated he helped them buy that house so that they could be closer to the hospital as they were elderly and had, as he stated, numerous health issues.
At any point, do you recall if Chad made any other statements regarding the election and or his voting in that election?
As we discussed it, at one point, the defendant asked what, or if there would be a fine associated with having voted in this election. And then I believe made another statement when I explained that because his parents claim a homeowner's exemption in Idaho Falls and he lives with them and takes care of them, that all three for voting purposes would need to vote in Bonneville County. And the defendant stated, well, shit, looks like we're getting a community center. And then again, if I recall correctly from my report, indicated that he did not know what he had done was illegal or had broken the law.
And Detective Harding, at any point had you observed the property on other occasions and been able to make any observations as to whether anyone was there during the winter months?
Yeah, I drove by the residence, and I would have to reference my report to get the exact dates, but it was during what we would call the off-season, or when there was snow on the ground. And in those two instances, did not see any tracks or what appeared to be any attempt to plow the snow. And I also observed plastic covering the front porch area, which, from my understanding, is typically done to winterize a cabin. And I believe I spoke to the defendant about that, and he mentioned the plastic being up.
And again, just to clarify, that's the Island Park property.
Correct.
Do you recall if the defendant made any comments as well regarding living in Idaho Falls to take care of his parents?
During the conversation, I believe the defendant made a comment about living or staying in Island Park in the summertime, and that he lives in Idaho Falls to take care of his parents that need to be closer to the hospital.
And do you recall the defendant making any comments about being barely able to get his parents to Island Park?
I believe towards the end of the conversation about when they got to Island Park that year, I believe that comment was made, yes.
And based on your conversation with Mr. Vanderbeek, was it your understanding that his primary residence was in fact in Idaho Falls during 2022, 2023, and 2024?
Yes.
As part of your investigation, did you also look at documents regarding voter registration?
Yes.
And did you also look at documents regarding whether or not a ballot was cast?
Yes.
Did you look at the actual way anybody voted?
No, at no point in time did we ever look at it, how someone voted, if they voted yes or no. That did not concern us, and we did not find that to be of evidentiary value, simply whether or not a vote was cast.
And then as follow-up on whether the vote was cast, whether or not that person was an actual resident of Island Park?
Correct. The issue at hand was if someone who was not primarily residing in the Island Park precinct cast a vote and should not have.
I don't have any additional questions at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Mallett.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Harding, do you know how many days were spent in each relative location between Idaho Falls and Island Park by my client?
I don't have the exact number of days, no.
Did you ask my client if he intended to continue residing in Island Park?
I don't believe that question was asked, no.
Did you ascertain if my client had ever voted anywhere else?
I do not believe we asked that question, no.
If my client intended to, well, I'm not going to ask you to speculate. Is it true that you told my client that he had to vote in Bonneville County?
I told your client that since his parents claim a homeowner's exemption in Bonneville County,
Is my client their parents?
I wasn't done my answer. Can I continue?
Hold up.
Objection, Your Honor, we've got the compound question, so the state would object.
So, Mr. Malik, I want you to rephrase or restate the question that you asked first, and then wait for the answer before you ask your second question. So go ahead. You asked your first question.
Is it true that you advised my client that he had to vote in Bonneville County?
I told your client that since he stated he
It's a yes or no question.
I told your client since he stated he lives with his parents and takes care of them, and because they claim a homeowner's exemption in Idaho Falls, which is Bonneville County, that the three of them would need to then vote in Bonneville County.
So is that a yes?
Yes.
Does my client claim a homeowner's exemption in Idaho Falls?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did you look up my client in any of your police databases?
We checked in our local files, yes.
Does that include driver's license information?
Yes.
Do you know off the top of your head where my client's driver's license is registered to?
Where it's registered to? I don't understand the question.
Do you know what address is on my client's driver's license?
I do know the address, yes.
What address is that?
I believe it's 4008 Rancho McCray Road, Island Park, Idaho.
Beyond caring for his elderly parents, do you have any information that my client intended on establishing permanent residence in Idaho Falls?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled, if the witness knows of something regarding that intent, I'll let him answer. If he doesn't know, he can say, I don't know.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do you have any information indicating that my client ever intended to establish permanent residence in Idaho Falls?
No.
To your knowledge, is my client registered to vote anywhere else?
No.
And he didn't claim a homeowner's exemption anywhere else?
No, sir.
You mentioned the parents' homeowner's exemption, correct?
Yes.
My client is not the same person as the parents, correct?
No.
And so in point of fact, you don't know whether my client intended to establish permanent residence in Idaho Falls, do you?
I can't speculate to what your client intended to do.
I'm asking what you know and don't know. You don't know, do you?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative, and this is getting into calling for legal conclusion or legal analysis.
Sustained.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect, Ms. Blake.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Harding, you were asked a question about the defendant intending to continue to reside in Island Park. Based on your conversation with him, is Island Park his primary residence?
No.
Objection calls for a legal conclusion, Your Honor.
Ms. Blake.
Your Honor, counsel asked the question about him continuing to reside in Island Park. I'm simply asking the detective a follow-up question on that, based on his conversation with the defendant.
I will overrule the objection. I'll have the witness answer the question. Go ahead, you can re-ask it, Ms. Blake.
Based on your conversation with Mr. Vanderbeek, was he residing in Island Park primarily?
No.
You were asked about his parents' homeowner's exemption. Where do they claim a homeowner's exemption?
In Idaho Falls, Bonneville County.
Now, when you talked with the defendant, what did he tell you regarding who he was residing with?
The conversation.
Ask and answer, Your Honor.
Your Honor, this line of questioning was open again, I'm just clarifying.
Overruled. The witness can answer the question.
The conversation was about that since he didn't have a 2023 tax return because he doesn't work, and that's because it was implied to us or told to us that he takes care of his parents and lives with them.
And when you spoke with the defendant regarding living with his parents, you talked with him about the years of 2022 to 2024, is that correct?
That is correct.
Was the focus of your investigation on those years?
Yes.
And where he was residing during those years?
Yes.
And in response to those, he indicated he was living with his parents and taking care of them?
Yes, I think specifically during that point in the conversation, when we spoke about those years, again, there was a conversation about 2022, the statement made about when the parents started to get sick, and then I asked the question, so is that when, I'd have to go back and read my report, but the question was asked about that being then when Idaho Falls became essentially the primary residence, and the answer was yes.
And you were also asked if there was any indication that the defendant intended to establish permanent residence in Idaho Falls. Do you recall that question?
Vaguely, yes.
Did the defendant actually relate to you based on your conversation with him? Was it your understanding that he is primarily living in Idaho Falls?
That was what I understood from the conversation.
And then as far as anywhere that he may intend to live now, again, are you focused on where anyone's residing now in 2025?
No, the issue at hand is voting in 2023, so that was the focus of our investigation.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, Detective Harding. You can be excused from the witness stand.
Thank you, Judge.
Ms. Blake, any other witnesses?
No further witnesses, Your Honor.
Any witnesses for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Defense calls Ms. Kimmy Vanderbeek.
Ms. Vanderbeek, I'll have bailiff retrieve her from the hallway. Go ahead. Did you say Cammy?
I did, Your Honor.
Ma'am, I'll have you come forward. You can stand right here in front of the witness chair. The witness stand, raise your right hand and face the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this cause now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
You can be seated right here at the witness chair. I'll have you face both tables there. The microphone is here to your left, but you don't need to speak into the microphone to be heard. Please give me your full name, spell your last name for the record.
Cammy Vanderbeek, Vanderbeek.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Malik, you may inquire when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Vanderbeek, could you please state your name? Oh, I guess you could just spell your last name for the record. Sorry. Have it. How do you know my client, Chef?
My brother.
Say that, if
He's
you'll
my-
wait for the question to be finished before you answer that, way the recording picks it up a little bit better. So the question was, how do you know Mr. Malik's client? Go ahead and answer.
He is my brother.
Thank you.
And so how long have you known him?
43 years
And do you know where he lives?
in Idaho Park.
How long has he lived there?
Since at least 2018.
Do you have cause to know what his plans are as far as permanent residency?
Yeah, he intends to continue to.
Objection, Your Honor, this calls for speculation, and it's a way to essentially allow the defendant to get testimony in if he's told or something.
Mr. Malik, you'll need to lay some more foundation if you're going to ask this witness that question. Go ahead.
Your parents are elderly, correct?
Correct.
Right. Who's their primary caretaker?
Chad.
The record will reflect that the witness has pointed at the defendant and said Chad. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Are your parents currently under medical supervision?
Yes.
Where are they under medical supervision at?
They have physical therapists and nurses that come to the home. My mom just barely left a rehab facility for like full spinal replacement surgery, so she's just been home for a short time since then, and they have caregivers that come in the home.
Do you know what their succession planning is as far as their estate?
Yeah, I'm the executor of the estate, so I know what the plans are for all of their properties and everything. And their intent is for Chad to maintain residency at the cabin. They plan on for him to inherit that.
Objection, Your Honor, this calls for speculation and hearsay. It's based on hearsay.
Mr. Malik, I'll let you respond.
Your Honor, my client just testified that she's the executor of her parents' estate and knows what their succession planning is. That is also a legal document, so even if it were based on hearsay, it'd be admissible as a legally binding document.
Give me the relevance.
That there is a plan and has always been a plan for my client to reside in Island Park and to inherit that home.
So if you want to ask questions pertaining to that as it pertains to the relevant dates, I'll let you ask that question. But as far as what happens here in the future, that's not relevant to the underlying issue. So the question was what's intended, and that's something that's going to happen in the future. If you want to ask a question related to what's happened in the past, specifically the date and the month of the election, I'll let you ask that.
Were your parents undergoing medical care in 2013 or 2023?
No. Not the kind of medical care they are now. I mean, they have periodic visits to doctors and stuff like that, but my dad is COPD and it's gone downhill primarily in the last year, and then my mom's surgery that's caused her to need care.
So, in 2023, do you know what your parents' primary residence was?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
If the witness knows,
And it calls for a legal conclusion.
sustained with regards to legal conclusion. Go ahead, Mr.
Do you know the purpose of the Idaho Falls home with respect to your parents' health care?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation and or based on hearsay.
The question was if she knows the purpose. I will allow that question, and then if you want to renew your objection as late, you may. So go ahead and answer that question. That's a yes or no.
So they lived in Island Park.
Hold up, ma'am. I'll let you answer yes or no to that question.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
And then I'll
Yes.
have the attorney follow up with another question. So what's your answer, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Malik.
What is that purpose?
They lived in Island Park full time, and when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, he was having to go for regular treatments, and that became really difficult during the snowstorms. There were times they were held up because they couldn't get down the hill, and so they had purchased that home to have easier access to medical care during the winters when he was going through that.
Did any part of that include intending to permanently move to Idaho Falls?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation and would be based on hearsay.
Mr. Malik, what would you respond?
It's just a follow-up question based on witness's understanding of what the plan was with the Idaho Falls residents and why it was purchased to begin with and what the intent was with that purchase.
So on sustained as to hearsay, if you want to rephrase the question you may, it also sounds like there's a foundational issue, so if you want to lay some foundation, I'll let you do so.
How familiar are you with your parents' residency situation?
Very familiar with it.
How?
I own Cabin Island Park. I go there and live, or go and spend a significant amount of time there. I've also become a secondary caregiver for them. I see them very regularly and know I'm very familiar with their residency situation.
Have you seen or reviewed documents relating to their home purchases and residency?
I have not.
Have you helped them with their taxes or done anything to support them?
No, I don't believe they've had to file taxes because they're at below a threshold or something. Or if they have, I don't know.
Have you had occasion to observe them in both locations?
Yes.
Do you know, based on those observations, where your parents and Chad prefer to be?
No, Island Park for sure. They've always considered it their home and love it more than anything. Idaho
Objection,
Falls
Your Honor, the state would move to strike. This calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
As a matter, for the record, Your Honor, I've asked based on personal observations, not for any hearsay words, and witnesses not actually testified to hearsay, just her observations about where people prefer to be, which is her own personal observation.
Okay, so in as much as there is not testimony as to what the parents have stated, I agree with you, Mr. Malik. But ultimately what you're asking is this witness to describe the feelings of her parents. And so I'm sustaining the objection. This is the wrong witness to answer that question. So the objection was as to speculation. If you want to lay some more foundation as to their desires or their, what they want, you can do so. But as of right now, I'm sustaining the objection as to foundation because of who this witness is.
Understood, Your Honor. You stated that your parents had a preference on where they'd like to be. How do you know what their preferences are?
because they've always had the intent of staying in.
Objection,
if
Your
I-
Honor, non-responsive.
Sustained, and as far as foundation, I think you're at the same point here, so go ahead, Mr. Malik.
Have you observed their demeanor?
Yes.
Have you seen how happy they are in Idaho Falls versus Allen Park?
Yes.
Have you observed where their personal belongings are?
Yes.
Have you observed where their personal keepsakes and cherished belongings are?
Yes.
Given all that you've observed, where would you say Chad and your parents prefer to be permanently?
Island Park.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect Ms. Blake. cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Vanderbeek, you testified that your brother is Chad Vanderbeek, is that correct? Correct. And earlier, you pointed at Chad. Is that in fact your brother?
Yes.
And that's Chad Vanderbeek?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask the record to reflect the defendant's been identified.
The record will so reflect.
Ms. Vanderbeek, is it fair to say that you care about your brother?
Most of the time.
Is it also fair to say that you don't want to see him in trouble?
Of course.
Do you live at Island Park?
No.
So you're not a resident of Island Park?
No.
You indicated that you'd observed your parents there. Do you visit Island Park?
Yeah, I own a cabin in Idaho Falls. I spent a significant amount of time out. Then I probably spend anywhere between 2 and 3 weeks a month there.
But you don't consider that your primary residence?
No.
Objection relevance, I guess, at this point, Your Honor.
Overruled.
And you indicated that you've essentially become a secondary caregiver for your parents, is that correct?
Over the summer since my mom got back from her surgery, yeah.
And Chad has been the primary caregiver?
Yeah.
Based on your observations, does Chad generally reside with your parents?
Well, currently, much more now than prior because of that need. Like he helps them because of the surgery and the COPD. They were able to care for themselves even last winter, but this winter, yes, I would say.
And to the best of your knowledge, do you know whether or not Chad owns any properties?
No,
No, he does not.
he does not have any properties.
I don't have any additional questions, Your Honor.
Redirect to Mr. Mallett.
So fair to say in 2023 then, based on the state's questions, that Chad was not full-time with your parents?
Not necessarily. Throughout time, he prepares the cabin, comes up earlier, stays later, closes it down. Because during the winter, they do need some help, right, with snow removal and stuff, but I would consider that his residence.
Do you have personal knowledge of where Chad spent the majority of his time in 2023?
Yeah.
Based on
Your
what?
Honor, I apologize, I'll withdraw based on the additional question.
Go ahead, Mr. Mallett.
Based on what? How do you know?
I would say conversations that we have and knowing my family's general preference.
So with your parents being older, fair to say you keep tabs on where they are
Yeah.
and whether Chad's there to support them?
Is that a yes?
Yes.
If you'll please say yes or no, it records a little better than shaking or nodding at the head. Thank you.
Where did Chad spend the majority of his time in 2023?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation, and also she indicated that it would be based on conversations which would call for hearsay.
So
speculation and hearsay.
as to those two things, if the witness knows the answer, she may answer the question. So I'm overruling the objection as to those two objections. Go ahead.
I would say that there's, in 2023, at their age, there was probably almost an equal amount spent.
Your Honor, the state's going to object again, and may I board irony of objection?
You may.
Ms. Vanderbeek, how do you have information on where your parents and or Chad resided in 2023?
Because they said they were residents of Island Park, and I saw them
And
spend
I'm
time
going to
in
stop you
Island
there.
Park.
So essentially, it's based on what they told you.
Yes, and seeing them live there.
Your Honor, I would renew my objection to this line of questioning. It's clearly based on hearsay.
So inasmuch as the witness is answering questions based on what has been told to her from other parties, I will sustain the objection as to hearsay. Mr. Malik, you asked questions about personal knowledge, so if there's questions along those lines about what this witness knows from her own personal observations, etc., that's definitely open. I'll let you go down there. But you can proceed with your questions.
Before you got cut off by the prosecutor, you stated that you did have some personal observations of where your parents were.
Yeah, I know that in 2023, they were planning on coming up a little early. I have a picture of their driveway, because we spent a lot of time there in the winter, that they had me take in April of 2023 to make sure that the file person had for them, so that Chad could come and open the cabinet and so they could come up. And their intent was to come up within a couple weeks after that.
Okay. And so, how often do you see your parents?
Every couple weeks.
And so, more than once a month?
Oh, yeah.
And so, based on that, you coordinate with them on where to visit them, correct?
Correct.
And then you do visit them.
Correct.
And so, would you say you have a general awareness of where they are at any given time?
Yes.
And does the same go for Chad?
Yes.
And based on those observations, where would you say that Chad spent the majority of his time in 2023?
Island Park.
And has Chad ever expressed to you a desire to live in Idaho Falls and stay there?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, that would call for speculation and hearsay.
Sustained.
And I move to strike and answer.
So stricken. Go ahead, Mr.
Your Honor, for the record, the absence of words is not hearsay. And so there's not a self-serving hearsay. It's just a matter of whether or not a preference had ever been expressed. And so it's a yes or no as to whether or not a desire to move to Idaho Falls had ever been expressed to the witness, which is not hearsay. It's something the witness has personal knowledge of.
Thank you.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
You can be excused from the witness stand. Mr. Malik, any other witnesses for the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Any rebuttal witnesses from the state?
No, Your Honor.
That will conclude the evidence then. Closing arguments from the state first. Go ahead, Ms. Blake.
Thank you, Your Honor. As the court is aware, State's Exhibit 1 lays out, and there was testimony regarding that at the time Mr. Vanderbeek would have registered to vote online, he claimed a residence address in Island Park. However, he claimed a mailing address in Idaho Falls, that an absentee ballot was in fact mailed to the address in Idaho Falls, and that he in fact did cast a ballot or a vote in the May 16, 2023 election in Island Park. Further testimony from Detective Harding established that as part of an investigation, he began to look into Mr. Vanderbeek, Chad Vanderbeek in particular, to determine whether or not he was in fact a resident of Island Park. Through his investigation, it was discovered that there was no homeowner's exemption. There was testimony that Mr. Vanderbeek did have a driver's license registered in Island Park at that address. There was testimony or reference to the fact that Mr. Vanderbeek's parents in fact own a property there in Island Park and also own a property in Idaho Falls. There was talk of the parents claiming a homeowner's exemption in Idaho Falls, and that when Detective Harding responded to speak with Chad Vanderbeek, that Chad indicated to him that he had primarily resided in Idaho Falls in the years of 2022, 2023, and 2024. The election in question was in 2023, and it was a specific election to Island Park in that specific precinct. Pursuant to the Idaho Code, a person is to register where they vote, is to register to vote where they primarily reside.
Can you give me- What code is that? Do you have that handy?
And Your Honor, just one moment, we had it pulled up. Looking at, so first you looked at Idaho Code 182306, which is the illegal voting, which is what the defendant is charged under. And then you look at Idaho Code 34107. It defines residence for voting purposes shall be the principal or primary home or place of abode of a person. Principal or primary home or place of abode is that home or place in which his habitation is fixed and to which a person, whenever he is absent, has the present intention of returning after a departure or absence therefrom, regardless of the duration of the absence. If the person claims an exemption, this is part of it, then if they claim any homestead exemption, that is where the person's primary residence is to be determined for voting purposes under the Idaho Code. If no such exemption is claimed, then in determining the principal or primary place of abode, the following circumstances may be taken into account: business pursuits, employment, income sources, residence for income or other tax pursuits, residence of parents, spouse, and children, if any leaseholds, and then where the personal and real property and motor vehicle registration are. So in this case, there was some questions regarding the homeowner's exemption. Number one, there is no indication that Mr. Vanderbeek claims a homeowner's exemption. So then under the Idaho statute, you go on to look at the additional analysis, looking for tax returns. No tax returns could be located. There was no indication that Mr. Vanderbeek had employment in either Bonneville or Fremont County. So one of the other factors you can look at is where the parents reside. In this particular case, there was testimony regarding the parents taking a homeowner's exemption in Bonneville County since 2016. Then there was the testimony from the testimony from Detective Harding regarding Mr. Vanderbeek's responses to his questions as to where his primary residence was in 22, 23, and 24. And his indication was that it was in Idaho Falls or Bonneville County. So when we look at the analysis and the law provided under Idaho Code, for purposes of a probable cause hearing, the state would present that there has been evidence laid before the court that Mr. Vanderbeek's primary residence, regardless of his intention, and I would argue that we really have had no testimony on that other than hearsay presented by his sister or attempts at hearsay as to where Mr. Vanderbeek's primary intention was. What he relayed to Detective Harding is he was the primary caregiver for his parents. A residence was purchased in Idaho Falls or was resided in Idaho Falls so they could be closer to their caregivers. There was testimony, I believe, from even Ms. Vanderbeek about Chad going up to open the property in Island Park and close the property in Island Park. There was testimony that Chad had indicated it was a summer residence, that he would like to live in Island Park, but he's living with his parents. It's a summer residence at this point in time. So for purposes of when we're looking at what establishes a primary residence and Chad's own statements to Detective Harding, the primary residence in 2023 was in fact in Bonneville County. There was testimony elicited that this is the only vote that has been cast by Chad Vanderbeek in Fremont County, or the only known vote, and that was in response to cross-examination. Mr. Vanderbeek does not have a history of voting here in Fremont County. Testimony was, we're not sure if he's voted other places. That was not definitively verified or looked into that we could definitively recall today. But we do know that he voted in the 2023 election. We do know his statements to Detective Harding are he was living primarily in Bonneville County during that time. And when we look at also then the analysis of where his parents' residence is, they claim the homeowners in Bonneville. That's one of the only factors that we could find definitive information or evidence in relation to where Mr. Vanderbeek was actually residing. We also had testimony from Detective Harding that at times in the winter that he observed, it appeared that the cabin had been closed up for the winter and that there were no tracks leading in or out indicating someone was living there. So based on all of that, the state would say for purposes of a probable cause hearing, that we have established the burden of more likely than not that an illegal vote was cast by Mr. Vanderbeek. In addition to that, there was testimony that when that voter card is filled out, there is a notification that you're filling it out under penalty of perjury, and it would be the state's position that, again, for purposes of a probable cause hearing, what was filled out and submitted by Mr. Vanderbeek was that his residence was in Island Park in 2023, when his statements to Detective Hardy were his primary residence was actually in Bonneville County. In addition, we have a mailing address provided of Idaho Falls for the ballot to be mailed to. The ballot was in fact sent to Idaho Falls and returned from the Idaho Falls address, not from the Island Park residence. So given all of that information, again, the state would present to the court, we think we've met the probable cause showing for purposes of today.
Ms. Blake, before I hear from Mr. Malik, is there any case law or any other direction that the court can look at that gives guidance as to primary residence besides those factors that you listed in 34107? In other words, is there a case law that describes when you say primary residence as a place where someone resided more than another place, if there are two separate houses? Tell me where you're getting, you've described a lot about primary and the amount of time, etc. Is there guidance the court can look at that describes that or defines that?
Your Honor, the state does not have case law pulled today. I would be happy to brief the issue if the court would like. I would indicate under the statute it talks about where someone has an intent to return. However, then when you go to the analysis, it's beyond just where someone says they intend to reside or intend to return to. And that's when you get into that analysis of did they claim a homeowner's exemption, where are their taxes, where are their place of business, where do their parents reside, where does the spouse reside? That's when that analysis kicks in. So I don't think there's a definitive, I live here more necessarily than there. However, I think that's when the legal analysis comes in about homeowner's exemption, and that's why when the discussion came up about the parents' homeowner's exemption, that's why it would be relevant pursuant to that second part of the analysis under that code section. It's well beyond just where someone says they intend to reside. You have to go to that test to determine residency.
Thank you. I think the question that the court has is, in that statute, where someone intends on returning, that doesn't really help the analysis, because it sounds like in this case, if they're in Island Park, they intend on returning to Idaho Falls, and if they're in Idaho Falls, they intend on returning to Island Park. But I can see where you're going. Ultimately, those factors is what kind of gives definition to what that is. Mr. Malik, your closing argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, I think it's worth noting that the state seems confused on where the burden of proof lies, and there's a lot of reference in regard to negative information, somehow redounding to the state's benefit about there being no tax returns, no homeowner's exemption for my client. To be clear, all of that evidence redounds to my client's benefit. There's no indication that under black letter law, my client has established residence somewhere else. There is, however, indication that my client has established residence in Island Park. He lives there. Ironically, when the detective was conducting this investigation, he was talking to my client in Island Park, and clearly had a lot of opinions about what he thought the law was and what he thought was appropriate, but he's not the arbiter of the law, Your Honor. For those legal determinations, fact finder at this hearing is you. The arbiter of the law in this case is you. And it is the state's burden to show that my client had the intent to establish residence in Idaho Falls, when the testimony is that he's been residing in Island Park since 2018. And the testimony is even that he has spent a majority of his time in the charged time frame in Island Park. What questions the investigator was asking in anticipation of litigation or determining wrongdoing, as it seems to have been the case, rather than determining, say, innocence. I think many of those questions are suspect, especially given that we have no body cam footage. I have no body cam footage. I don't even have this statement referenced.
Your Honor,
yeah.
Sorry, the state's going to object briefly here. The state has provided discovery, and I would just indicate there is body cam of this interaction.
Thank you. Mr. Malik, you can continue.
In fact, I don't even see a report that the officer referenced, let alone body cam footage. So I'll just finish what I was saying. With respect to so what we have is my client, in fact, had a driver's license registered to that address. My client registered that address and swore under penalty of perjury that that was his address on a legal document, establishing, therefore, the intent to be there in Island Park as his permanent residence. Establishing, as a matter of law, that that was his intent. We have no indication that he voted anywhere else, no indication that he intended to reside anywhere else permanently, and that he'd been living in Island Park since 2018. So the state keeps bringing up things that aren't there as if that's evidence, and it's not. And so, like I said, the state seems confused on whose burden this hearing is, who needs to prove what. And the state has not established my client ever intended to move permanently to Idaho Falls and establish that as his primary residence. Now, the cop asking, hey, is this your primary residence, is that your primary residence? I mean, those are words of legal effect, and here we are parsing the words of an investigator and whether or not the situation was accurately described to my client when the questions were asked. All that's fine and dandy, but the simple fact of the matter is my client signed a sworn statement when he cast his vote regarding where he considered his permanent residence to be, and that was Island Park. His driver's license reflects that. The fact that he was there at that residence when police talked to him speaks to that. The fact that he continues to go there, return to that residence, no matter, according to black letter law, no matter how long his absence was, continues to return to that address. And as Your Honor heard, the purpose of the Idaho residence was to facilitate care for my client's elderly parents, which is not a statement regarding permanent residence. The state also keeps mentioning what my client's parents chose to do with respect to their taxes and their homestead exemption. And frankly, Your Honor, that's not relevant. I mean, it mentions parents, but maybe if my client were 18 years old and under the care, custodial care of his parents, maybe that would have something to do with that. But my client is a grown man, can establish his own intent to reside wherever he wants. And as you heard, did not fully reside with his parents in 2023. His parents were capable of residing on their own for periods of time. And so my client spent more time in Island Park in 2023 than in Idaho Falls. And my client was not with his parents full time. So it was not their ward or under their control such that their decision should reflect on him. And again, the state has not established that this was in any way a fraudulent or an illegal vote. They mentioned that my client hasn't voted in the past. First of all, absentee voting, not illegal. So as voting season rolls around for primary season and the early months of the year, sure, if you're snowbound in Island Park, you may want to be in Idaho Falls and be receiving mail in Idaho Falls and receive an absentee vote in Idaho Falls. That does not establish evidence that my client wished to reside permanently in Idaho Falls. In fact, the opposite is true, that he asked for an absentee ballot to be sent to Idaho Falls and received it there. But that's all legal activity. It is legal to request an absentee ballot. I've requested an absentee ballot. I didn't have a choice when I was in the military. It's not illegal to cast an absentee vote. And the state bringing that up, I think, is tendentious at best. In no way reflects an intent to vote illegally. It is all legal activity. And again, that form indicated my client considered the Island Park residence to be his home. So all the actual documented evidence points to my client desiring to live in Island Park, to reside at the residence that was on his driver's license, and where he voted from. And the state has provided no evidence to show that my client ever intended to vote anywhere else, establish residence anywhere else, or permanently reside anywhere else, or return to anywhere else, other than the place where, again, the police apparently surveilled this year, even though it's not the year in question. And that's somehow relevant. It's not. Whether or not, the driveway had been plowed this year, or whether or not my client was there during the snowy months this year. And so, again, there's no indication at all that my client intended to remain in Idaho Falls or establish permanent residency, and was there for any other purpose other than caring for his elderly parents when he's been residing in Island Park since 2018. Thank you.
Mr. Malik, before you sit down there, I got a couple questions for you. So, beyond those factors that I've talked about in 34107, and the factor that is listed very specifically in the code about a homeowner's exemption, is there any directives? I'm reading Idaho Code 182306, and I mean no disrespect to the legislature, but this is a very long run-on sentence. It's difficult for the court to interpret what the elements are, but it looks like intent is one of the elements. Is there any directives or any case law that you have off the bat that you can direct me to that give guidance as to where someone's residence is beyond the factors of 34107? In other words, is it possible that someone can live at a place for 1 month out of the year, but that is their residence and that is lawful? And if you don't know the answer, I'm not expecting you to pull anything out of your hat. I'm just wondering if you do, I want to know that.
So my read, and again, I turned to the black letter law, Your Honor, is that most of those factors related to establishing intent via other means. And so it doesn't matter where you are most of the time, except for that may be an indicator, a non-binding indicator of where you prefer to be, where you want to be, where you consider to be home. But that, yes, you could reside just based on the statute for 1 month in one place, as long as you consider that your permanent residence and intended to return there, it would be your permanent residence. And the reason for that, I think, I don't have case law off the top of my head, Your Honor, but for, say, military purposes, that was my personal situation. My permanent residence was the state of Idaho. I didn't return there for years at a time sometimes, but my permanent residence was the state of Idaho, so I didn't establish residency in any other location. I intended to return to Idaho, but my absence was quite lengthy and ongoing for more than 13 years. Yea, verily, here I am, returned to Idaho. And so, I don't think it provides a clear answer for Your Honor, but I think it is a multifactorial analysis regarding what someone's subjective intent is, and that this is a specific intent crime that the state has not met their burden on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Ms. Blake, will you the last word if you'd like?
Thank you, Your Honor. And maybe to clarify at least the state's interpretation of this statute, is I think we're talking about intent and then this different analysis as if they're two separate things. The state's read of the statute is they're actually meant to play hand in hand. So we look at intent, but in order to prove intent, because anyone can just say, this is what I intend to do. And so I think subsection 2 is meant to be the check on that, or the test for what is someone's intention. So if someone says, my intent is to return to this place, the statute's clear, they can be gone for a significant period of time. Counsel brought up military leave. I think that's a perfect example. Someone may be gone for a very significant period of time, but their residency doesn't change. But what we're looking at is this analysis of, did they claim a homeowner's exemption? And if they didn't, then we're given these other factors to look at. So I don't actually think these are two separate things. I think we're looking at intent, and then the test to prove intent or to establish that is when we're looking at the homeowner's exemption and we're looking at these other factors, where someone has a business, pays taxes, parents reside, employment. And counsel brought up that the state says, well, we don't have a lot of this stuff. The reason for that is under this analysis, if we don't have a homeowner's, this is the next test that we go to prove intent, where someone intended to reside for purposes of voting, where their permanent residency was going to be for purposes of voting. So I don't think they're two separate things. We had to go on to that second part of the analysis because we didn't have a homeowner's exemption, and that's where we then looked at these things. So when we talk about the absence of them, that's also telling that there is no indication that there was an intent to reside here in Fremont County because these things don't exist here in Fremont County. The one thing that we did have in this case is where the parents are located or where the parents claim a homeowner's. And counsel pointed out that that wouldn't be applicable in this case. There's nothing in the statute that delineates. We're talking about an 18-year-old. The reality is if we're talking about voting, we're talking about adults. And yet the statute still specifically says where the parents reside is one of the factors. And so as we're going through that analysis, I don't think they're the two separate things. I think they're one thing. So as far as the defendant's intention, that's why when his statements to the officer are, I am residing with my parents, their homeowners is in Bonneville. I'm their primary caregiver, I'm going to be where they are. Homeowner's exemption is in Bonneville County. He's telling the detective, I mainly lived here in Bonneville County. I spent summers in Island Park. I don't think the statute was such to say if I just intend to go somewhere every summer, that's my primary residence. That's why we have these other factors that we're looking at to say where in fact is someone's primary residence. Otherwise, someone would just have to say this is my intention and that's it, and we'd stop there. But they added the whole subsection 2, delineating out what we look at. So in this case, again, I think the state has proven for purposes of a probable cause hearing that the defendant's primary residence was in fact in Bonneville County. When we talk about the absence of other votes, counsel brought that up. It was actually during cross-examination that that question came up. And counsel's talked a lot about we don't have any votes somewhere else. However, that is telling as well. If there was an intent to establish residency here in Fremont County, this is the only vote we have in Fremont County is in 2023. One vote in 2023. No votes before, no votes after that we're aware of. And that he registered to vote initially on March 28th of 2023, just before this May 16th election. That's the only vote we have. Then we have the defendant's statement to Detective Hardy that with this particular election, he felt that a property owner should be able to do what they want with their property and he should be allowed to vote. Then we also have his statements, am I just gonna face a fine or something? And oh shit, it looks like we're getting a community center. So for purposes of probable cause, I think the state has met the burden to show that the defendant's primary residence was not in Island Park at the time that he registered to vote and at the time that he cast the ballot.
Thank you. I appreciate the testimony of and the argument made by both parties. This is a unique case, one that does not have a lot of case law in Idaho's history, and so it's one that I'm going to take under advisement so that I can do a little research on my own with regards to case law, residence, etc. This is a case that I'm happy to rule from orally from the bench. Welcome to you, Mr. Malik.
It will, Your Honor.
Ms. Blake, any objection to an oral decision on whether or not probable cause has been shown today if I do that in the future?
No, Your Honor. And then just to clarify, does the court want briefing from either party or is the court just intending to issue that decision?
If either party would like to brief, I would very much appreciate that, specifically case law pertaining to residence, intent, etc. Ms. Blake, if you'd like to brief that, my preference would be simultaneous briefing from both parties. Any objection to that, Mr. Malik?
No, Your Honor.
If I allow 2 weeks for both parties to submit briefing before I make an oral decision, as to probable cause will occur for both parties.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
So we'll set a deadline to submit those briefs, and that will be October the 8th at 5 o'clock. Those briefs will be submitted and served upon the other party. If there any reason to submit responsive briefs after that, I would allow that if it's just 7 days later. Do either of you want to respond to the other's brief?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll just allow you both to submit those by October the 8th at 5 o'clock, and then I will set this for a hearing to make a ruling on whether or not probable cause has been shown. That will be October 15th, and we'll set that at 3:30 in the afternoon. I don't mind if the parties appear via Zoom for that oral decision, or it can be here in person. Which do you prefer, Mr. Mott?
I prefer to be here in person, Your Honor.
All right, we'll just do it here in person. I think that'll be easier for everybody. And I'll make my decision on the record at 3:30, October 15th. Anything else we need to bring up on this case before we take a recess?
No, Your Honor, thank you for the time.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the zealous representation.